This is Caserta. It was begun in 1751 for Don Carlos VIII, King of Naples, with the explicit aim of being the biggest and grandest garden in all Europe. It's certainly enormous and very grand, but it also contains one of the first examples of a new style that was to revolutionize Italy's formal gardens. By the time you've walked through the palace, it's so impressive that you're in a state of submissive shock, really. And then you come out into the light and the landscape, and everything is funneled down to this extraordinary vista, just narrowed down to a point, and as though it takes your natural impulse to look out and forces it in. And of course, that's all about power. It's doing it because it can. And it's just saying, you know, be amazed. Well, you can't be anything else. It's amazing. Whilst all your attention is focused towards the cascade, 3 kilometers away at the far end, to get down there and visit all the garden is a walk of over 8 kilometers. So, I hire a bike to get around. These high walls of trimmed trees and hedges around the bosco, or ornamental woodland, are a regular feature in Italian gardens, but I never tire of them. The view is so compelling and steers you on so much that it's easy to overlook how wonderful the bosco is. And it's that combination of the clipped edge of the wood, like a hedge, and then the trees spilling over the top, that is deeply satisfying. It's a lovely thing, a bosco. This is the epitome of high Baroque and Rococo design. Dramatic, confident, and elegant. And with nature always firmly under control. Do you know, I'm feeling quite excited about this. When I came here, I'd seen pictures, and it looked very static. It looked this power statement, here I am, I can do this, admire it, now push off. It's not like that at all. It unfolds and is progressive. As I'm cycling along, there's a sense of a narrative, and I'm part of it. I'm not excluded. The scale of the garden is simply breathtaking. Just to bring the water into the canal and its fountains, Caserta's architect, Luigi Vanvitelli, blasted through 6 hillsides and built a 33-kilometre-long aqueduct. But this was a final flourish, because Caserta was the last palatial garden to be built in Italy in the formal style. It took 25 years to make, and by the time it was complete, gardens across Europe were being changed forever. The strange thing was that in 1786, just really little more than 10 years after the formal garden was finished, it was out of date and a new garden was started. And this new garden was exotic and absolutely the height of fashion. And it was called the English Garden. On a 50-acre plot, especially bought for the purpose, is a garden as different in style to its predecessor as could be imagined. It looks like nothing so much as an English country park. The whole style was based around taking the elements of the countryside and including them as part of the garden. This new style was based on the landscape movement. Rather than regulate nature in ordered ranks and lines, it set out to absorb and replicate it. It actually takes as much control and as much skill to make things look natural as it does to make the garden look formal. And one of the key things is parkland, where you have large trees with grass underneath. But of course, this is the baking south. Grass doesn't grow easily, and the large trees are not the ones you'd normally expect to see in England. I mean, I can see a huge cork oak, I think it is, and there are cypresses, stone pines, palms. None of the elements would you find in the average English garden, but the general feel is certainly true to the type. This type was begun by William Kent 50 years earlier, and then made popular by Capability Brown. And the new fashion transformed Britain's gardens before spreading across the continent. Ironically, this style of gardening was based upon paintings of imagined classical landscapes and was known as the picturesque. As a result, classical temples and fake ruins became highly fashionable garden accessories. To go down an overgrown path and come across a fully blown temple is a surprise, which is absolutely in the spirit of the picturesque style which this garden is based on. Whereas in the formal garden, you see everything, literally for miles, and if you're going to have a temple, you put it on the top of a hill. Whereas with the new style, everything is a moving tableau. It's to delight you and surprise you, or even horrify you, certainly to titivate you. So to brush through the undergrowth and come across a temple as though it's been lying there for years is exactly the required effect. This English garden at Caserta is contemporary with the new Romantic movement that took the frisson of raw nature and celebrated it as a reaction to the industrialization that was taking place. In the process, the Romantic poets, such as Wordsworth, Keats and Shelley, created a new artistic language that valued the imagination and emotions as highly as the previous era had held rationality and the intellect. This is an Nymphaeum, and any self-respecting English garden by the end of the 18th century had grottos and places where hermits might stay, and they were meant to evoke a response in the visitor. And in fact, this is where the picturesque moves into the Romantic period, where it's all about feelings rather than about thoughts. And this carried on right through the 19th century, and you'd have little places where you could wander to look. Inside this rocky, rather wild place, there is a statue. Whoop! And oh look, a complete abandoned, lost piece of classical world. But this is not a ruin that has evolved through time. This has been manufactured to look ruined. There'll be statues, and what's a real shame is that the people that wander through now do seem, particularly around Naples, to have a desire to leave their mark. And nobody's stopping people do it, and no one seemed to clear it up. Maybe nobody minds. The great discovery of the Renaissance was classicism, with its humanism and order. But a couple of hundred years later, in the Romantic garden, classical civilization is depicted as picturesque ruins designed to deliciously thrill you with a display of mortality and decay. But not all the thrills of the garden are solemn. I like that, because there you have a nymph washing decorously, and from the front she's covering herself up. But this is a peek at her bum, and I like the sense of what the butler saw, that she doesn't know we're here and we're spying on her. The fashion for English landscape gardens lasted in Italy until the Neo-Renaissance revival in Florence at the beginning of the 20th century. But the Romantic influence remained particularly strong here in the south of the country, attracting artists, writers and musicians to escape the restrictions of Northern Europe. and their influence in particular found its way into the gardens of the region.